Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Week 5 about to get underway, and we have some suggestions for you. Some good ones, too. Better than Corbinian Holzer, although he wasn't a bad one. I'm Gamby with my co-host Brandon, and I think this week we actually have a grammar school, so Brandon's going to teach you something here.
Yeah. Taro Hirose, it's not right. Despite the fact that looks super right, it's not right. It's Hiroshi, which also sounds super not right, but okay. I mean, what... Is there an accent or something on the E?
No.
What language?
It's the same language that Shillington goes by.
Yeah, I guess. Or Sekara, depending on what day of the week it is or however he does it these days.
Depending on how he's feeling. Okay, moving into the week review after grammar school. My first one here is Bob back? Shutout.
Oh, God. You
Bob
wish.
Is back. I mean,
mark it down on your calendars, ladies and gentlemen. October's over.
Bob is back. This is the November of Bob.
He's taking the Rask approach. Rask and Bob swapped.
Bob got inspired by Dia de los Muertos and came back to life.
My first one is the Rangers lost their best center in Mika Zibanejad, and now their best center is, I guess, Ryan Strome. And they won 2 games against like pretty respectable
Tampa
teams.
And Nashville.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it time to trade Mika Zibanejad?
Is it time to pick up Ryan Strome and all? Wait. I know what's going to happen. There's going to be a blurb on Roto World like today that Ryan Strome is a must-own in all pools.
Probably.
It's like their favorite thing to say.
Yep.
I actually do like Strome as long as he's playing with Panarin, even if Zibanejad's back. But I hate the term or the phrase must-own. I hate it so much.
It just doesn't apply to everybody.
And
very rarely is someone a must-own.
It's such a pointed phrase that, like, how must-own compared to who? It's all relative. So you can easily get confused, and especially newer players can drop a legitimate stud that's struggling for... Yeah, I could see somebody dropping Timo Meier for Ryan Strome, right?
Yeah.
Super possible. And don't do that, please.
Yeah, no. My next one here, speaking of Timo Meier, is San Jose. I know we've talked about this a few times now, but I think they actually suck. Like, actually suck. They're a bad team with bad goaltending, and both goaltenders suck. And both goaltenders sucking are one. I think they're both genuinely bad goaltenders. But on top of that, I think they also have a terrible defensive system. They currently have lost 5 in a row. They are last in the West, and they have 1 more point than Ottawa, but Ottawa has 3 games in hand.
Wow. I mean, you have to assume here that that there's going to be some management changes of some kind coming.
I mean, I just don't know what they do. You need a goaltender, obviously, but with what cap space do you have?
You trade for Francouz. Come on, that is the answer.
Oh, God.
You trade for Francouz and you solve your problems. Cheap goaltender, 1-year contract. Please make it happen. I would be, oh man, that would make my day. That would make my whole fantasy season.
I really would just love to see Jonathan Quick go to the Sharks to see the whole Western Conference implode.
That would be funny.
Or just Los Angeles.
That would be funny. I don't know who else would be available. I mean, you could take a swing at Jake Allen, but I mean, all right.
They're trying to get better, not worse.
I think that's lateral than anything at this point, but all right. Next up, the Islanders have won 9 in a row.
The anti-Sharks.
I don't know. I think all of us. So last season, everybody came into the season being like, okay, the Islanders suck. Because, of course, right? Like they lost John Tavares. I mean, they had Barry Trotz, but how much can a coach do? Turns out a lot. And they were the worst defensive team in the league. Trotz went, no. And then Mitch Korn was like, all of my goalies are gods now. And then the Isles became impossible to score on and played some kind of boring hockey, if I'm honest, but it's effective, apparently. And now they just keep winning. This is the longest win streak, I think, since like 1990 or something. It might even be earlier than that. They may have broken that one at this point, but they're getting pretty close to franchise record stuff, which is crazy considering you look at the team on paper and it's not good. But they have a system that's working, and it's a system that seems to be working despite the fact that all the analytics show them as a bad team. And this is the same thing that happened last season. So it's makes me wonder if is it really just they have some sort of crazy magic going on over there, or are they doing something that is profound in a way that the current analytics we have are not addressing how it's working?
I don't know. I think it's something in the water.
It might be. Maybe they're just all doing drugs. They just all hopped up on coke.
The Barry Trotz method.
My last one is just Radulov did stuff. So yay
Finally.
For everybody that hung on to him.
Or picked him up because he was dropped prematurely.
So I was pretty stoked to see that they reunited the Ben Sagan Radulov line despite whatever, and they put together that top power play that we all expected at the beginning of the season with those three plus Klingberg and Pavelski. Still mixed reviews on Pavelski, obviously, but that top line was the cornerstone of Dallas doing anything last season. So the fact they broke it up so early and just kept blending instead of just going back to what worked kind of confused me to start with. So I'm happy to see it come back together, and I'm happy to see Radulov do what he does. Now he does have 5 points in 3 games, but all four of those 5 came in one game against Minnesota. So let's kind of pause a bit before we freak out too much. But it's just nice to see Radulov put some numbers on the board. We saw him. This is a couple of times now that he's put up huge eye-popping shot numbers, which is fairly unusual for him in a game. So I want to see more of that. I want to see this line click like it did last season. And I want to see Dallas be Dallas again. Next up is the injury report, and it's long. It's super long, both leaving and coming, so to speak. Okay, let's start at the top. Gabriel Landeskog. He's listed as more than week to week with a lower body injury. We don't know a whole lot more than that. I don't really want to speculate, so I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. You can take that as you will. I will speculate a little bit. I've heard December a couple of times, but we'll see. Next up, Mike Green is day-to-day with an illness. Now, Mike Green's not the highest owned guy, and you might be wondering why somebody with an illness is even on here, because typically I wouldn't put them on here. If a guy's sick, Marc-Andre Fleury is not making this list because he has the flu, whatever. He's going to be back in a game or two. It's not really noteworthy. But Mike Green is on here because he missed significant time due to a liver virus. And I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I'm under the impression that was never fully resolved. And if that's back, it could be, it's obviously bad news for Mike Green, but it could be good news for Hronek and to a lesser extent, Cholowski. So it's a little bit less about Mike Green as it is about the rest of the team, and about this might be longer term than just a standard illness. Next up, Mika Zibanejad is day-to-day with an upper body injury. He's apparently skating by himself, but you can take that as you will. There's that can either mean he's coming back next game, or it could mean he's still out for a long time. We don't really know. Next up, Patrick Hornquist was just moved to IR. I haven't checked if they gave him a timeline, but the fact they moved him to IR means it's probably going to be at least a week, because he only went out on Saturday. So probably not good news for Hornquist, who is, not exactly a stranger to the IR. All right, we got an update on Tarasenko. Upsetting news for just about everybody that has him. And by just about, obviously everybody that has him. He's out for a minimum of 5 months. He's being reevaluated with shoulder surgery. I actually think unless you have a lot of IR slots, Tarasenko is pretty close to droppable in a lot of leagues. You look ahead 5 months from now, you're talking about mid-March. You're probably already in playoffs or just starting them. And that's when he gets reevaluated. So it's not good. Now, there is the flip side of it. You could try to buy him cheap if you have the stash space and hope that you get him for playoffs, but that's a long-term gamble, and I wouldn't want to spend too much on it. Personally, I have him in a league. If I were to get in a situation where I had a third player, I have 2 IR slots. If I got a third player that needed to be on IR that I wanted to keep, Tarasenko would be going to free agency. So next up, Victor Hedman is still day-to-day with a lower body injury. It seems like he's closer to playing than not, but he himself says he's taking it day-to-day. So again, kind of just trying to speculate here. Jake Muzzin, day-to-day with a leg injury. Quinn Hughes is day-to-day with a knee injury. And that's it for the guys going out. But a lot came back or are coming back. Andre Kasha returned. David Krejci returned. Devin Dubnyk returned. Matt Duchene returned. Evgeny Malkin returned. Way ahead of schedule, by the way. John Tavares looks to be close. They were playing with the idea of him actually suiting up on Saturday. Didn't happen, but I think it's even in a weekly league, I'm skating him because I assume he's going to be back in the next game or two. Brian Little returned. He's also a guy that's not highly owned, but it's kind of an interesting player to come back because Liney essentially threw shade directly at Brian Little over the offseason, saying he doesn't like his line mates, and he was basically pointing fingers at Little, which, yeah, that was weird. And Little played it off as well as he could. He was like, "Oh, I know Liney, he's a good guy, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't mean it." But I feel like if I was in Little's position, I'd be a little not. If I was in Little's position, I'd be a little unhappy about that still. Philip Forsberg returned. Nate Schmidt returned. Sammy Blais returned, and then took Tarasenko's spot on line one. So that's interesting. And then lastly here, we have Alex Galchenyuk returning, but because Malkin also returned at the same time, it doesn't seem like he is going to get top power play. And that's it for the injury report.
Well, I hope you enjoy Brandon's voice.
Yeah, I'm very soothing.
Okay, so let's move on to drop candidates here. And my first drop candidate is going to be someone that I think may be a little bit surprising. He's one of the most dropped players on Yahoo today. Victor Olofsson, left wing, right wing, 68% owned. Yep. He is still, I think, a Calder favorite to an extent. The problem for me with Victor Olofsson,
I mean, Makar is that tough at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to beat him. But I'd say that Victor Olofsson is still doing well. He has 10 points in 15 games. The issue for me, and I've said this many times when we've talked about Victor Olofsson, is that 8 of his 10 points are on the power play. He only has 2 even strength points. His even strength minutes are dropping because he's not doing much on the even strength. And like I've said before too, it's not entirely his fault. Buffalo as a whole doesn't really produce that much on even strength. And so there's just not many points for Victor Olofsson to get involved in on even strength. So I'd say that there is an avenue for him to be good. But the problem is right now it's just not worth it. And Buffalo has a bad schedule this upcoming week. There's not really a reason to hold him at the moment, in my opinion. His shots aren't that great. His shots have dipped a lot in the recent few games. He only has 4 in his last 3 games. So it's really just not worth a hold at the moment, unless you're in like a deep league in terms of players that you own or just teams in general. If you're in a deeper league, then he's worth more still, but I'd say he's droppable. I dropped him in our 12-person league and my 12-person keeper league.
Yep. My first one is a player at 77% ownership that I have just dropped. Martin Jones.
It's time.
Might be the worst starter right now. I think he's the worst starter right now.
Yeah, easy.
Oh boy. Yeah. So we at least I kind of propped him up quite a bit this season, thinking Martin Jones has been an average goaltender his whole career, and he had one significantly below average season, and it seems likely he'll pop back up. What actually happened is all of everything in San Jose just sort of fell apart. Maybe Pavelski really was the glue holding everything together. But yeah, so now you have bad numbers and no wins, and that's no fun, especially considering there's a lot of actually fun goaltenders on the wire in a lot of leagues that are just better at this point. Robin Lehner comes to mind, who's probably, I think he's like 60% owned. I would have like a Thomas Greiss or a Varlamov. A bunch of these guys are like fairly high. Riddick, for example. There's a lot of these goalies, and even though they're high owned, a few of them will wind up on different, even fairly deep leagues throughout the season. And I'd have any of them over Jones at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a streamer spot is worth way more than owning Jones. Like what owning Jones just right now is not worth it. My next one here is going to be a defenseman, Justin Falk, 56%. This one's pretty self-explanatory. His minutes have fallen a lot. I think he's sitting at like 18 minutes a game right now, somewhere around there, 17, 18 minutes. He just doesn't give you what you want. And before it was like, okay, well, at least he gets you peripherals. He's not even getting you that many peripherals. It's time to drop. You can give up on him.
Yeah, so I'm interested in why it seems like defensemen seem to be the players that are harder to drop for whatever reason. We talk about McAvoy all the time. We've talked about, well, now Falk, we've talked about more than once. And now here, Eric Gustafsson, 69% defense. He has been scratched the last 2 games, or maybe just the last game, but it's still not looking good for him. I think more scratches are probably coming. I don't know why he's that high owned. I get in like pretty deep leagues, maybe, but he doesn't have peripherals to back up the lack of production. I would let him go in pretty much any league. Once a guy gets healthy scratched, you better show me or you're gone.
Yeah.
And I'm not really waiting around for him at this point.
Like, for example, I think especially in a peripherals league, I think in points leagues is where it gets tougher to drop a defenseman like him because the replacement level is just so it's hard to replace them, and you don't want an empty roster spot. You'd think at least, but honestly, an empty roster spot is probably worth more.
Yeah, I might run an empty defense spot to stream out an extra forward.
Yeah, for Gustafsson, for example, like I think if you're in a peripherals league, let's say blocks, hits, pims, any of that kind of thing, a specialist is worth more than Eric Gustafsson at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, my last one here is going to be Oscar Klefbom, defenseman, 73% owned. Look, the story of Oscar Klefbom in fantasy is he fluctuates between a long-term ad and a drop candidate every single year at different points in the season. He currently has no points in his last 8 or something like that, if I remember correctly. I'd say that he still has value in peripherals leagues. Like, especially I'm still holding on. Yeah, like I'm holding on to him because of blocks and hits. And he does shoot a little bit too.
He shoots a lot. He doesn't get a lot of hits, but shots and blocks are pretty good.
Yeah, so shots and blocks are good. And then points are what's bad. So I'd say in a points league, he's 100% droppable. Like if it's a points league or a Cats league that is very heavy on just points for skaters, then I think you're very, very safe to drop. If you have blocks and shots, that's fine to own him, but just recalibrate your thinking behind him and realize that he's a peripheral guy at this point.
Yep. And my last one here, we've talked about a few times also, Capo Caco, right wing. He's still 49% owned. His ice time is not there. Top power play is fun, but it doesn't seem to matter. That's all. I get that there's pedigree there, but he's just not showing it.
Okay, now moving into long-term targets. My first one is going to be Philip Hronek, defenseman, 23% owned, getting tons of minutes, and especially now with Mike Green out, he's pretty much a lock on that top power play. I get that.
No, he's got to watch out for Cholowski, but that's about it.
Sure, I'm not too afraid of Cholowski personally. But I think that he's doing really well. He looks great. Detroit has a fantastic schedule this week, so it's a great week to add him and hold. And I think he could very well be a long-term target. I think this might be a little bit early to call him a long-term target, but I think I can see him turning into one really quickly here. And I don't think he's going to last on the wire very long.
Well, for what it's worth, I had him on my long-term targets too. So my first one is Wayne Simmons, right wing, 31%. This is more for a Cats league, but the fact that he's 31% and most leagues are Cats is kind of surprising to me. He does, he gets banger stuff. He's been shooting a lot. He's been shooting a lot more than usual for him, actually. His shot pace is almost 50% up on the season. So he's definitely putting the puck towards the net. It just hasn't kind of gone in all that much with an only below 3% shooting so far on the season. So he's got 6 points in his total 12 games. He got 5 of them in the last 3. He's got potential as long as he's on that top power play, and his ice time is like all right, around 16 minutes a game. It's not fantastic, but for a kind of like middle of the pack to lower end forward, I like him, and especially if he's going to keep this up. And again, Jersey has got a decent schedule coming up too. Not a great one. I think they only have 2 off nights, but it's hard to find any this week, and they have 4 games. So especially in PIMS leagues, Simmons is always going to once in a while get himself tossed or fight somebody or whatever. So he's good for that too.
My next one here is going to be Sami Vatanen, defenseman, 6% owned. I know you're not going to like this one too much.
I picked him up.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. Look at that. So Brandon normally doesn't like defensemen like Sami Vatanen, but the thing is, right now he's top power play. He's especially good for points leagues. He's not fantastic for peripherals leagues. He's very hit or miss in the peripheral department, game to game. Not much consistency there. But when it comes to points, I mean, he's been killing it recently. And the fact that he's getting more minutes, getting that top power play, and the Devils seem to kind of be figuring out this whole scoring thing a little bit more. And Sami Vatanen seems to be kind of factoring in. And 6% to me is very low for what he is. When you look at a guy like PK Subban, who's still, I think, 50-60% owned and not doing much, Sami Vatanen to me is a great ad, and he's someone who's probably available even in the deeper leagues.
Yep. I don't know how long-term he's. I really don't think he's going to keep that top power play forever, but as long as he is, he's worth it. My last one, since you took Hronek from me, is Ryan Getzlaf, actually. Now, he's slightly above 55%, but I'm under the impression that is because everybody picked him up today, this being Sunday, because they play Sunday and hardly anybody plays Sunday. So he jumped 26% overnight.
Whew.
So I'm under the impression, considering Anaheim does not have a great schedule next week, they play all the heavy nights and they only have 3 games, that there will be a deep drop in Getzlaf ownership. But I think he's worth it. He's playing like a little bit less minutes, as we've talked about, but he's playing a different game. He's playing he's a lot more shot forward. He's less reliant on his wings, which we haven't seen a lot at Getzlaf in recent years, or ever, really. I mean, at the best of times, Getzlaf was a pass guy to Perry when Perry was good. And now they swapped out his line mates, and he's more reliant on being a kind of a one-man show, but it's working. So whatever. He's getting a lot more shots than usual. He's getting a good amount of hits as well. He also will get PIMs typically. So for Cats leagues, he's pretty good. His hit pace is a little bit lower than last season, but it's still good for about 150, which is pretty solid. So his numbers altogether look pretty good. I don't think we're going to see necessarily the power play points come back, and he's still, again, he's not like, I don't think he's going to be amazing, but he's definitely rosterable, and he's been pretty consistent over the last few weeks.
Yep, correct. My last one here is going to be another Devil in Kyle Palmieri, right wing. Now, he is 65% owned, but a lot of people were frustrated with him, and I would assume he was dropped in a lot of leagues. And my guess would be that the people that dropped him are people that are paying attention or savvy or overthinking themselves, that sort of thing. And so there is a chance that in your league he was available, is available, that sort of thing. So I would check to see if he's on the wire. Especially in a league that counts shots, I just don't see why he should be available. Even in a points league, honestly, at this point, with how well he's been playing, he's worth a gamble. He's worth a roster spot. And so I'd take a look to see if he's out there, because I think he's definitely a long-term target who should not be on the wire. And he was available in my league, in our main league, actually, and I was able to grab him off the waivers. So he's definitely worth it. Okay, moving into the week preview. Let's start first with the teams with 4 or more games. It's going to be Edmonton, Detroit, Boston, the New York Rangers, the New Jersey Devils, Vancouver, Chicago, Toronto, Arizona, Ottawa, Philadelphia, and the Vegas Golden Knights. And the teams that play only 2 games are going to be Anaheim, Buffalo, Dallas, Tampa again. I feel like they continue to get shafted by the schedule. And then Washington lastly. And then teams that play 3 or more off days. Now, to explain off days really quickly, off days are when less than half the teams are playing on a given night. And more often than not, that's when you'll be able to start players because you won't have to bench. And that'll be Edmonton, who has 4. Detroit, who has 4, Boston has 3, and then the New York Rangers also have 3. And piggybacking off of those schedule suggestions there, I'll jump into my first short-term target, which will be Ryan Strome, center, right wing, 20%. We talked about him a little bit. I do think he's short-term because once Mika Zibanejad comes back and the line blenders in the New York Rangers team continue, who knows where Ryan Strome ends up. He could stay up there with Panarin. He could move to second-line center. He could move to third-line center. Who knows? So as long as he's with Panarin, before the message was as long as Zibanejad is out, but now I'm not so sure. I think right now it's just as long as he's playing with Panarin, that matters. Now, one thing to pay attention to, though, is he's also top power play while Zibanejad is out. And I would assume that once Zibanejad comes back, he loses that top power play. So, although they also have bums on the power play, so who knows? He could maybe take over somebody there. Everyone sucks. So, he could maybe stay on the top power play, but he may not factor in as much anymore once Zibanejad comes back because the puck goes through Zibanejad more. So, he's definitely a short-term target, but with the 3 off nights, he's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I agree. I have him in mind as well. My first one, and I feel like this player for me is going to be this year's Mikhail Backlund, where every time there's a decent schedule, he's the first player I'm looking at, and that's Andreas Athanasiou. Center left wing, 14%, plays all the off nights. It's really, really hard to find a team that plays all the off nights if you are unlucky enough that you don't have room on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, which I have seen in more than one of my teams so far. So that makes him extra valuable because extra starts are extra starts. Plain and simple. And if you can get 4 of them out of a player, it doesn't even matter if they're mediocre because they're just going to do it by volume, which is good enough. And the thing with Athanasiou is I still believe he's a player on the cusp of like breaking out sometime. I don't know when. Maybe it'll never happen, but I just have that feeling about him. And I mean, I would, if you play him this week, you just, even if he plays, again, mediocre, you get a good week out of him because you get the off nights. And if he plays great, you get to hang on to him. So I still like him for the upside, and I just like him for the week regardless.
My next one is going to be Jake DeBrusk, left wing, right wing, 29% owned on the Boston Bruins. Of all the players I took a look at this week, he's probably my favorite to kind of bet on as far as a points perspective, just because Boston has the 3 off nights. He has good, okay, not good, decent deployment for what he is, and Boston is red hot. I like Boston's schedule as well. It's not a fantastic ad, but it's probably the best one that's going to be available in your league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely like DeBrusk this week. I mean, again, the off nights are really hard to come by. He's got 3 of them, and because Boston also plays 4 games. If you have availability on, I think it's Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday is the heavy game night that they do play. If you have availability on Tuesday, you actually will get 4 games out of him. So I do think he's probably the best ad for most teams this week, if he's available in your league. All right. You also I had him on my list as well. So I'm going to move into I picked up a couple low ownership players here. One of them is more about if you can get him in at least 3 games, I think. Ideally, if you can get him all 4. I was lucky enough that in one of my leagues, I could get him in all 4. And I mentioned him last week already, or rather, yeah, last week. Anthony Duclair. Left wing, right wing, 3%. I want to call him long-term, but again, I mentioned him last Monday, but Ottawa only played 1 game, so you're not really going to take a stab at it. Ottawa plays 4 games. Unfortunately, they only play 1 off night, and the rest of them are heavy game nights, but if you can fit him in, he's playing pretty crazy right now. Like in a peripheral league, he's putting up everything you could want out of a forward. And I don't see why they won't keep running with that over in Ottawa. Although, man, Ottawa lost Logan Brown now too, so they are just out of centers. They lost Colin White, Logan Brown, losing all the colors. I don't even know what they're going to do over there. It's probably going to wind up being like Peugeot or something strange as top line center, but Duclair hopefully won't be affected too much as he just gets the puck and shoots it and then runs into people, which is cool. I like that.
Hey, at least they're not the Sharks.
Apparently not, right? Jeez, you'd think you have essentially a team full of 3rd and 4th line centers, and you lost the 2 best ones you had. So it's man, Ottawa. Jeez, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be like to be an Ottawa fan. Oh wait, I'm a Rangers fan. Never mind, I know pain. Okay, moving into my last one here, also from Boston, David Krejci, a center, 19% owned. Again, kind of like DeBrusk, where it's not necessarily the best option in the world. But again, this week is just tough from an off-night perspective because Edmonton, most of the best guys are owned. Detroit, most of the best guys are owned. Boston, most of the best guys are owned. The Rangers, they suck. So there's just not a lot of options from an off-night's perspective. And David Krejci just came back. He got 2 points in 2 games. Getting some decent time on the power play. His percentage on the power play isn't that high, but Boston's actually getting quite a bit of power play opportunities at the moment, which gives David Krejci's second unit quite a bit of time on the power play, and he's doing well for himself. He's shot a lot in these last 2 games too since he returned, so I actually kind of like him as a potential long-term ad, especially if you're weak at center. He could be interesting. He did get 72 or 76 points last year. Let me check that really quick. He got 74 points last year, so 73 points, 74 point pace, whatever. But he's a pretty decent ad, I think, for this week and potentially going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I didn't have him on my list, and I should have mentioned him while I was mentioning Duclair, but Connor Brown is also fairly interesting lately. He's got 11 points.
Yes. Yeah.
He has 11 points, and he's 6% owned, and his shot rate is pretty good, and they're playing him over 20 minutes a game. He's not super interesting, like from a actual player standpoint, but I mean, he's point per game for the last 7 games. So no, 9 games. So that's pretty good. It's pretty good. But yeah, I like Duclair more than Connor Brown. In a points league, I think I might go Connor Brown. I don't know, but they're both pretty close. And I have one more here. Philly Heat.
Philly Heatle.
Yeah, Philip Heatle. Center right wing, 2%. This is in really deep leagues. I don't really believe in Philly Heat, but the Rangers have 3 off nights, and again, super hard to come by this week, and that's kind of reason enough. You can win leagues with bad players if you just maximize your starts, and that's what Philly Heat does. And he's got, he came out strong so far. So they're going to need to rely on him because especially if they don't get Zibanejad back. If he gets sent down, that might be a problem. But
he's been playing so well, though. I don't see him getting sent down.
Yeah, but you could see him wind up on third line or something, which also wouldn't be great. But you can also see him on the wing. So anyway, I like him for this week because of the matchups. I don't think he's going to be a long-term hold because I just don't think there's enough there for him, especially after Zibanejad comes back. But for this week, I think he's a pretty good ad, especially in deep leagues.
Okay, and there is your week preview for week 5. Lots of off nights, just tough to take advantage of it. We'll be back on Wednesday with your unsustainable episode, and Friday, of course, with the weekend preview. And also pay attention during the week for any kind of bust watch or hot hands videos, which Brandon are going to start to make too.
Whee!